Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing well. They ask you of the crescent moon. Yes, يسألونك عن الأهلة. So they have, obviously this is what they have translated as crescent moons. And if you have watched the previous video, you know, the previous two videos, you know that is not accurate. And then it says قُلْ هِيَ مَوَاقِيتُ. Mawaqit has been translated as measurement of time. Again, is inaccurate. Okay, first verse I would like to share with you is verse number 142 of chapter 7. So Moses completed miqat of his Lord for 40 nights. So what is the miqat here? Miqat is basically that appointment. It's kind of like a date. It's like a place where Moses had an appointment with Allah. So Moses went to this place on top of Mount Sinai for his appointment with Allah, right? So keep that in mind. The second verse I would like to discuss with you is verse number 50 of chapter 56 in the Quran. All of you will be gathered in the gathering place of that well-known day. The third one that I would like to discuss with you is verse number 38 of chapter 26. And it's basically the story of the Moses and the magicians, right? It says, and all the magicians, فَجُمِعَ السَّحَرَةِ. It means the magicians gathered together for the gathering place or for the appointment of the very well-known day. And this is the verse that we discussed before, verse number 17 of chapter 78. Day of judgment is a gathering place at an appointment time. So it has nothing to do, again, you see miqat here. In none of these verses, miqat has anything to do with crescent moons. Nothing to do with crescent moons. So verse number 143 of chapter 7, when Moses came for our appointment. It's kind of like a date. You go on a date with someone. So what do? You say, okay, I'm going to meet you in the mall at this store at this certain time. So that's what it is. It's a miqat. You are going for a miqat. Now it could be for one person, it could be for 2 million people, or it could be for entire mankind, as it's supposed to happen the day of judgment. And then verse number 155 of chapter 7, and again this is really interesting. I want you to look at this. It says Moses chose, vahtara means chose, from among his people, قَوْمَهُ سَبْعِينَ رَجُلًا, 70 men for our miqat, for that gathering place at an appointed time, for that appointment, for that gathering place that was supposed to happen at an appointed time. So Moses gathered them together for that miqat. Moses plus 70 men from the Israelites gathered together, that's a miqat. And then verse number 40 of chapter 44, day of judgment is a miqat for them, for all of them together. What does that mean? It means that all of us, you, me, everyone, Prophet Muhammad, from Adam, who was the first human being, to the last human being, who I have no idea who that person is, we are all going to gather together in the day of judgment, and that is a miqat. We all gather together. We're all together in the day of judgment, and then Allah is going to judge us. There should not be any questions in your mind about miqat. So what is a miqat? Miqat is a gathering place or an appointment place at a specific time. That's what it is. That's a miqat. Nothing more, nothing less. Quran is very clear on that. So once again, very quick overview, 7:142, Moses finished the miqat of his Lord. 26:38, the sorcerers gathered for the miqat of the well-known day. 7:155, Moses chose 70 men for the miqat of his Lord. The day of judgment, again, is a miqat. So what is a miqat? Again, one more time, I just want you to remember this very well. Miqat is a gathering place at a specific time, just like a date or an appointment. Back to the verse, they are, ahilla are, so I'm going to just cross this out, gathering places at appointed time for the people and for Hajj or for pilgrimage. Is that clear? These were gathering places where people from all around the world, all around the region, they would come up the pilgrims would come up in these caravans with camels, with various means that they had, and they could not come to the city because the cities back then were really small. They didn't have capacity for all these people. So if you're talking about tiny cities, people had houses beside each other. They did not have hotels like we do, or motels, or any of those things. So people had to literally camp outside. So remember, people had to camp in these places. And at this point, these are technically the Hajj. After they camp here, the Hajj is the start. You go into the state of Ihram. What does that mean? It means you have to keep clean. You have to avoid doing bad things and saying bad things, fighting, arguing, all these things, because you are in the state of Ihram. So basically, these are starting points for Hajj. And then from here, they would basically, in the mornings, they would go perform their Hajj, stay there, and then they had sacrifices. They would eat their food there, and the evenings they would come back and sleep here. So in the mornings they would go, they would do Safa, Marwa, they would do the Kaaba, they would worship, they would praise, glorify, and they would come back. Again in the morning, they would go to Arafat in the next day, they would worship, they would stay there, they would eat food because they always had sacrifices over there, and they had food, so they would eat and they would come back. Okay, this is the route of Halla. Again, as you can see here, this is the route and this is Halla. So and then you can also see the word Hilal and Ahilla here as well, but they're all from this route. Let's see what it means. Halla, initially, this is what it means: to appear, to reach its season, to start. And then the dictionary goes on to gives us some example. It's the early ripened melons started appearing on the market. The other example that it gives us is disasters befall us as soon as you show up. Root is used to mean show up here as well. Another example that it gives us is, welcome, O month of Ramadan, your crescent has appeared. Halalaka halla. It means your present started, has appeared. So this is why they call with the moon, the halal that's being used. Is because this root originally, what it means is that when you appear, you reach, you start something. So that's what it means. It also, as I mentioned in the Quran, what it means is that when you start calling food, you introduce it, you call it, you proclaim it, or you announce it for anyone other than Allah, that food becomes forbidden or haram. And it's because that food, you're starting that food for other than Allah. That food is basically appeared and is proclaimed and is announced for other than Allah. But we go further down, and you see another example of this root that is used for istahalla. And what does that mean? What does that mean? Again, to begin, to start. So to begin, to start. So for example, the example that it gives us is that he started his speech with poetry. And again, the other example, another derivative of that is mustahal. And again, mustahal means the beginning of something, the start of something, introduction of something. So this is one miqat. This is miqat number 1. This is, for example, this is hypothetical. So this is miqat number 2. This is miqat number 3. This is miqat number 4. So what are these mawaqit, which is the plural of miqat? What are these? These are the starting points of Hajj. So when you camp here, far away from the city, this is the starting point. This is the introduction. This is the appearance. So these are the starting points for Hajj. Is that clear? So ahilla is the plural of halal. So what is halal? Point of appearance, introduction, and starting. So it was also announced, named, and dedicated for the pilgrims and their caravans. So these points were announced. So everyone knew that the caravans from, for example, Syria or Sham would stop at that miqat or that halal. and the caravan from Yemen would be gathering in the southern Hilal or Miqat. So, and the caravan from the east, from the Iraq and Persia, they would be stopping at certain points. That's why the Quran says, Mawaqitu linnas wal hajj. These are basically gathering places at appointment time for people and pilgrimage. So that's what it is. These are basically, what is Ahilla is the starting point. People gathered in these places, and from there, the process of Hajj would start. As soon as you're in that place, as soon as you're in that gathering place that has been announced and proclaimed for you, let's say I am coming from Syria, for example. I'm coming from Syria, there's a gathering place for my caravan that has been announced and has been proclaimed, that has been dedicated. So I would go to this gathering place. That's the point, that's the starting point for me, for my Hajj. So as soon as I settle down in there, I start my Hajj. So that's my miqat, that's my halal, that's my starting point. It has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with the crescent moon. Nothing. You don't find any evidence in the Quran, in the Torah, in the Bible. Look for in the Bible. You don't find any example in any of the divine books of Allah that a prophet, a messenger, a holy man ever went outside and observed the moon crescent and determined the beginning of the month. That's nonsense. In fact, Quran doesn't even call the crescent moons halal. The Quran calls them manazil. It says وَقَدَّرْنَاهُمْ مَنَازِلَ حَتَّى عَادَ كَالْأُرْجُونِ الْقَدِيمِ. That we determined for moon phases, crescent moons, the crescents until it returned as the old date stock. The word for the crescent moons in the Quran is manazil. It has nothing to do with halal. It's nonsense. Peace and blessings to all of you.